Yo, what's up, nerds? It's MTG Man, and welcome to another $100 deck tech. So somebody asked me the other day, hey, MTG Man, can you do the Arctic Monkeys deck tech, but without the Arctic part? I think snow really brings down the deck, and I said sure. Kibo Prince is one of my favorite commanders of all time. So this is just a regular Kibo deck for $100. That being said, let's just get into it. So Kibo Prince, he's a 3-mana 2/2. You can tap him to have each player create a colorless artifact token named Banana. Bananas can be sacrificed to add red or green, and you gain 2 life when they're, well, not you gain 2 life, but the person who sacrificed them gains 2 life. Um, Second ability, whenever an artifact an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control that's an ape or a monkey. This is an ape monkey typal deck that also creates artifacts for your opponents, and then when they sacrifice those artifacts, you put counters on all of your apes and monkeys. Now, we don't use a lot of typal support synergies. You don't really have banners, you don't really have kindred cards because we're playing both apes and monkeys, so it kind of just gets a little mixed up and kind of takes away the power from those cards. And whenever Kibo attacks, defending player sacrifices an artifact. So it kind of does all three things. It gives them the artifacts you need for them to sacrifice to add the counters on the monkeys, and it also gives you another way to make them sacrifice artifacts, so they can't just hold on to the bananas forever. We also play some artifact sweepers like Anzag's Rampage, Brotherhood's End, Meltdown, Pulverize, and Vandal Blast, which Vandal Blast can be cheaper and single target removal. Pulverize can be cheaper if you just sacrifice 2 mountains instead. Brotherhood's End also acts as a board wipe, and Anzag's Rampage is going to let you cheat out a creature. Basically, even though we can get them to sacrifice artifacts with Kibo, it's nice to have other ways to make them just sacrifice all of their artifacts, because let's just say each opponent has 2 bananas. Each opponent has 2 bananas and a mana rock, okay? So in a 4-player game, they're sacrificing 9 artifacts total, and we're putting 9 +1/+1 counters on all of our apes and monkeys. This deck can kind of get out of hand super quickly depending on what the board state is. Cost reduction wise, we play Goblin and Narcomancer just to make our red and green spells cost 1 less. Moving into draw, we have Armorcraft Judge, where when it enters, we draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Kibo puts counters on your whole board that's monkeys and apes, so you can be drawing like 2, 3, 4 cards off of this, which can be pretty solid. Beast Whisper draws a card whenever you cast a creature spell. This deck is about a third creatures, if not more, so it's a nice way to just draw through your deck. And you want to build up a board state of creatures, so it's just a positive impact. Inspiring Call, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, kind of like Armorcraft Judge, but it also gives them indestructible, so it kind of protects your board on top of drawing you a bunch of cards. Cathartic Reunion, because it's just a good draw spell. Faithless Looting, because it's a good draw spell. Ren's Resolve, because it's good impulse draw. The Guardian Project, so whenever a non-token creature enters, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control, or a creature card in your graveyard, you draw a card. So this is just like a second Beast Whisper. Again, the deck is like a third creatures, so just being able to draw off every creature is going to help your deck get much faster. And then Viridian Revel, so whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard, you draw a card. This counts tokens as well, so if an opponent sacrifices a banana, we're also drawing cards. Or if Kibo makes them sacrifice artifacts, we're drawing cards. It's just going to help the deck go much faster. Moving into cards I like to call Hate, these are going to punish your opponents for either having artifacts or sacrificing artifacts. Which, I mean, Kibo punishes them already, but this is just a little bit extra. Bloodroot Apothecary. So whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token or a non-creature token, they get 2 poison counters. So if they sacrifice 5 bananas total, they lose the game from poison. Also, when Bloodroot Apothecary enters, you and target opponent each create a treasure token, so it's just another way to give your opponents tokens. Pain Distributor. Whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, they create a treasure token. So this will help you create treasure to cast your spells, but also make your opponents create treasure. And Kibo doesn't just say when bananas are sacrificed, it's whenever an artifact goes to the graveyard. So treasure, food, clues, any of your opponent's tokens going to the graveyard is just going to be more and more counters on your creatures. And Pain Distributor is going to give them a lot of tokens. Sardian Avenger is going to get really big if they don't end up sacrificing their tokens, but if they do sacrifice their tokens, then the rest of your board gets big, so it's kind of a lose-lose scenario for them. Plus, when it deals 1 damage every time they sacrifice an artifact, it doesn't counteract the 2 life they gain from a banana, but it just slows them down a little bit. Vengeful Tracker, on the other hand, does counteract the 2 life they gain from a banana, and it's just going to punish them for sacrificing artifacts. Ancient Runes is the real last hate piece here. Ancient Runes is interesting, because during each player's upkeep, Ancient Runes deals 1 damage to that player for each artifact he or she controls. So the more artifacts they create, the more damage they're going to be taking. But if they choose to sacrifice those artifacts so they don't take damage, then Kibo's going to pump up the whole board. So it's another one of those lose-lose scenarios you want to put your opponents in. Moving into Miscellaneous Synergy, Crime Novelist is going to let you sacrifice your bananas for extra mana. Being able to add like 2 mana every banana, it's just going to make you go a lot faster. Plus it'll get bigger as you sacrifice bananas. Marvin Murderous Mimic is kind of just a nice option because it has all activated abilities of creatures you control. So it'll have Kibos creating a banana ability, which will just kind of help speed up your game plan because it'll help you create tokens for your opponents faster. Liquid Metal Coating is going to have target permanent become an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. This is actually super useful because the deck does a lot of artifact removal, so being able to turn your opponent's creatures or enchantments or planeswalkers or whatever into artifacts is going to let you remove them a lot easier. Moving into monkeys, a lot of these are just because it's good to have monkeys on a board. I mean, the game plan for this deck is turn 1 monkey, turn 2 monkey, turn 3 Kibo, start creating bananas, start having your opponent sacrifice shit, and then eventually steamroll with your board of monkeys. So Clockwork Percussionist, Ferocious Tigerilla, which is also nice because it has Trample and or Menace. Again, Kibo doesn't give them Trample or Menace or anything like that, so they can just be chump block. We have other ways to give them Trample later. Gorilla Berserkers, good because of Trample. Grun the Lonely King can get really big, depending on if it attacks alone, or if you can pay the kicker. Hooting Mandrills is nice because it has Trample, and you can cast it for cheap with Delve. Curd Ape, Scrounging Bandar, Silverback Shaman has Trample and draws you a card. Simian Simulacrum is just nice for counters. Simian Sling is just a cheap monkey. Simian Spirit Guide you can discard to add mana, which is nice. Tree Monkey, because it's a cheap monkey. Octavia Orangutan destroys an artifact, which will give you a Kibo trigger, plus it's an ape. Zodiac Monkey. And then moving into ramp, a lot of people notice that I play like artifact ramp even in green decks. I honestly just like 2 mana rocks a lot. I think the strategy of turn 1 this into turn 2 mana rock is going to be more satisfying for me than a turn 1 monkey, turn 2 mana, or a turn 2 nothing, and then a turn 3 cultivate. You know, that's why I don't really play a lot of that 3 mana ramp, especially because on turn 3 you should be playing Kibo. You shouldn't be playing cultivate, you know, things like that. However, this deck does have one exception. Anywho, Arcane Signet, Gruul Signet, Liquid Metal Torque, again, being able to turn non-land permanents into artifacts is going to let you destroy your opponent's shit easier. Soul Ring, Entish Restoration is my one exception. Being able to sacrifice a land and search your library for 3 lands if you have a creature with power 4 or greater is just really nice because that's a lot of lands. And you're going to have a creature with power 4 or greater because Kibo just really bumps up your board. Rampant Growth, it's the one green ramp spell I'm very persistent on. I think it's very strong. So it's basically an auto-include for me. Moving into other ramp, kind of. Descent to Avernus is ramp, but it'll also help your opponents create treasures, which they'll sacrifice to bump up your Kibo, and it'll burn out the entire board, which is just very nice. Gearbane Orangutan, when it enters, you can destroy up to 1 target artifact, which is just removal. Gorilla Shaman can destroy an artifact, which is nice removal. Kagla and Udaro can be discarded to destroy an artifact or enchantment, or when they enter, they fight a creature you don't control, which is removal. Kogla, when it attacks, destroys an artifact or enchantment, which is removal. If you notice, this deck has a lot of strong artifact removal, which is just going to help you pump up your board and just make it even stronger. Masked Vandal, sure, it exiles an artifact or enchantment, but it also counts as an ape, so it's just nice to have 1 more monkey in the deck, basically. Silverback Elder, when you cast a creature spell, you can either destroy an artifact or enchantment, gain 4 life, or look at the top 5 cards of your library and put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. This is a nice way to destroy more artifacts, and it's probably one of the best apes in the deck. It truly is a great ape. Yavimaya Steel Crusher, you can sacrifice to destroy an artifact, plus it's an ape. Beast Within is just good removal. Blooming Blast gifts a treasure, so it'll make your opponent create an artifact, which is just useful for the deck. and it's decent removal. Cathartic Pyre is removal and draw. Chaos Warp is just solid removal. Guthrie Wright's History is one of my favorite removal spells. I'll give you a second to read it because it's definitely a bit chaotic, but just the amount that it can shuffle, three target permanents into their opponent's deck. Sure, it's non-enchantment, non-land, but it's still just a good way to get rid of multiple things on board. Stump Stomp is a land on the other side, plus it's a nice fight spell. Moving into token makers, these are just other ways to make your opponents create tokens. So we have Generous Plunder, where at the beginning of your upkeep, you can create a treasure token, and when you do, target opponent creates a tap treasure token. Just another way to make your opponent create artifacts. When it attacks, it deals damage to defending player equal to the number of artifacts they control. Jolene the Plunder Queen, whenever a player attacks one or more of your opponents, the attacking player creates a treasure token. So basically, it's just going to help your opponents create treasure when they attack your opponents. So when they attack anybody but you, they create a treasure, which is good because then if they sacrifice that treasure, you get more from Kibo. Marching Duodrone, which just when it attacks, each player creates a treasure. It's just a nice way to create treasure across the board. Moving into the next category, these are just kind of ways to give your things trample. Like Dustshell Crawler will give all your creatures with +1/+1 counters trample. Kenrick Charioteer just gives everything trample. Overrun is an overrun effect that gives creatures +3/+3 in trample. And then Overwhelming Stampede gives your creatures +X in trample, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So in a good Kibo turn, this could be like +10/+10 depending on what's on the board, and can definitely just lead to you winning a game. Win con wise, Hellkite Tyrant. So when it deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. Here's the thing. If your opponent has a board of 5 treasures, 5 treasures / bananas, when you attack, they have 2 options. Either get you closer to winning the game, or they sacrifice them and you put 5/+1, then you put 5/+1/+1 counters on your monkeys or apes. Hellkite Tyrant is just a lose-lose for them because either you get 20 artifacts and win the game, or they sacrifice their artifacts and you bump up your board and win the game. Guerrilla Warcry just gives all your things menace. I didn't want to put this in the trample category, so I just kind of put it in the win con. It's also here because it's just flavorful and it draws you a card. It just all creatures gain menace. It's not like anything crazy. I just like it because it's flavorful, draws a card, and gives your shit menace to help them swing in and win. Moving into lands, Cinderglade, Command Tower, Forests, Game Trail, Mountains, Restless Ridgeline, Sheltered Thicket, Temple of Abandoned, and War Room. Pretty simple land base. Pretty simple deck overall, but very powerful depending on if you can pull it off. So we would keep a hand like that. We would draw for turn 1. We would play a forest, pass. I think here we want a Arcane Signet, which kind of hurts. Restless Ridgeline into Zodiac Monkey. I know you... No, I think if I had to take that back, it would probably be turn 2 Zodiac Monkey into a turn 3 Kibo into a turn 4. Turn 4, I think we play Restless Ridgeline, Arcane Signet, pass. Create a banana, pass. And then on this turn, we go banana to Silverback Elder. Actually, we would keep the banana. Then we can Vandal Blast to destroy something. And then when Kibo attacks, we could either have opponent sacrifice an artifact, or we could have him not attack and we create another banana, move to turn 6, and then turn 6, there is a whole 3 bananas on each opponent's field. So we just 1, 2, 3 Brotherhood's End, destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. So at very least, very least, we are hitting 9 bananas. And we bump up our whole board by +9/+9. And at that point, we could probably either start swinging in to win the game. We can play Gearbane Orangutan if we sacrifice some of our own bananas, which will destroy an artifact. And then when it enters, Silverbane Elder will trigger, and we could destroy another artifact. Basically, the deck just plays till its end. It has removal to remove things in the mid game, but as soon as you get kibo on the field, you just want to build up your monkeys and then destroy all the artifacts on the field and then win the game with an attack. It's definitely a simple deck overall, but I would say it's very enjoyable. It has a very fun game plan. Playing a second game here, this is definitely an even better hand, actually. So we go turn 1 Curd Ape. I forgot to draw for turn 1. But we go turn 2 Goblin and Archomancer into a turn 3 Kibo into turn 4 Stump Stomp transformed. That's just each spell. So I guess we would go Rampant Growth, search for a forest, move it to the battlefield, tapped. Shuffle. Sorry, that entered tapped as well. I guess we would tap Kibo for a banana, and then use the banana, use the command tower, and then cast a Gearbane Orangutan, destroy another opponent's artifact, so we get a +1/+1 on all of our monkeys. Go to turn 5, go 1/2 for Uktabi Orangutan, destroy an artifact, which will put a +1/+1 counter on all of our monkeys and apes. Create a banana with Kibo. I think Cathartic Reunion, discard. Actually, no. No, because we want Overwhelming Stampede next turn. Maybe hard cast. I don't even know. Go to turn 6, play a mountain, play Overwhelming Stampede, and then we've destroyed at least 2 artifacts. So we have at very least a at very least a 4/4 Kibo. So we could Overwhelming Stampede for +4/+4, and then when Kibo attacks, we'll have to sacrifice another artifact. So at that point, our board is at least +5/+5. Plus, they already had 2 +1/+1 counters. So everything is basically +7/+7 and trample. And you'd swing in and maybe take out an opponent, or you would just hold off and kind of play mid-range. I mean, it's not like classic mid-range, but you just don't die in the meantime. You have a nice board of creatures to block with. You have removal to remove threats with. It's not mid-range, but it's definitely mid-range. That being said, this is Arctic Monkey's Thawed. Let me know what other decks y'all want to see. Aether Drift spoilers are coming soon, so I'll probably be covering that as those come out. But that being said, I will see y'all next time. Peace.